So, Steve Laffey, why is corporate America, the federal government, is so up in arms over this DEI? It's exactly what Donald Trump told them he would do. DEI has gone so far to the left that it doesn't make any sense anymore. Why are people so feigning all this being shocked?
They are feigning. Feigning is the right word. They are feigning being shocked. And what has happened to corporate America versus, say, 40 years ago when Jack Welch and people were around, these corporate leaders just could blow with the wind. They are going to be with Biden, and they're going to do electric cars at Ford Motor Company. They're going to lose $78,000 a car. They're going to do DEI. And when the wind shifts, they're going to hop on with Donald Trump, and they're going to say, you're the greatest guy ever, and we want to do AI, and we need energy, and you want to produce oil. We love it. We think it's great. And then this pretense of a DEI has always been something that it just hurt America. It's hurt the federal government. At least this is one of the things that President Trump is moving with, and moving with fast, so that we can have a more productive country. Because, heck, it was just Martin Luther King's birthday, right? We should be judging people by the quality of their character, not the color of their skin, not their sexual orientation. And in the military, we need the biggest, the baddest, the toughest to defend our country.
And what is wrong with these federal workers who've had a vacation for almost 6 years? They have other jobs going on as they work for the government. What is wrong with demanding them to come back to do their jobs at work?
Yes, they need to be back in the job. When I was making the movie Fixing America and in D.C., one of the federal workers just said about the problems in America, he just waved his arm and said, you could start right here. Now, I'm wondering whether Donald Trump is serious, because by Monday, I'd like to see the Department of Education start to go away, and the Department of Energy, except for the nuclear stuff they have to move around, to go away. And there ought to be a 4-year hiring freeze on anybody except military and so forth, so that no one's even being hired. We need a massive head reduction. We can start at the Federal Reserve. There's 23,000 employees there. We probably need 3,000. So not only not go to work, get rid of 20,000 people at the Federal Reserve, and let's get going. That's $1 billion a year.
And what about this rhetoric that we've got to be sensitive to the historically marginalized groups?
The rhetoric should have stopped many years ago, but I was on a show with you several months ago, and one of the left of center people who came on said to you, it's never going to stop. We're never going to do stuff. They need jobs in the federal. That's what they do. They want to unionize. They want to control things with the federal workers, so they have power. It's all about power. And fortunately, in this case, Donald Trump is exercising some power to get rid of it. And I think most Americans will applaud it.
You know, Joe, so, and then migrant come to this country. He's illegal. They have a baby. The baby automatically becomes a citizen of the country. I mean, and then there are people who take 20, 30 years to follow our rule of law, to become a citizen of this country. And yet you have people just can say, oh, I'm in America, I'm illegal, I shouldn't be here, but I'm gonna have a baby, and my baby is a citizen, so that's gonna give me some rights, and I'm gonna fleece and smooch off the federal system and the taxpayers that work hard and long to pay for this. What is wrong with Trump saying, let's put in place common sense laws, we've done this enough, we've got to get this under control? What about this craziness of pushing back on this birthright citizenship? To most Americans, it makes sense.
Well, look, I think when the president starts talking about birthright citizenship and whether or not we should have it, I think this is recognizing the fact that we do have an immigration system that is out of control. Our borders have not been enforced. Of course, it's gotten far worse the last 4 years, and this has to stop. Now, whether or not the president has the power to end birthright citizenship, that's going to be decided in the courts.
Two-thirds of Congress. It's a constitutional issue. We get that.
It would require a constitutional amendment. You cannot change this by executive order. However, I do believe the president is right, both in his campaign and also on Inauguration Day, to recognize that the American people are tired of our borders not being enforced, and that is going to begin to change this week.
But how does the declaration of a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border aim to address these ongoing immigration and drug trafficking issues?
Well, one of the initial ways is that the president now is able to send, I believe, close to 10,000 troops.
He said, I think he started with 1,500.
Sorry, yes, 1,500.
Yes.
To assist the Border Patrol and Immigration Naturalization Service that is already there. I think that's going to be welcome relief. A lot of the communities, especially in Texas, are very much in favor of an increased presence.
And the president also said, look, I'm a critic of Donald Trump, but I'm also, I want to be fair to him. What is wrong with saying to people in the military, for those of you that were terminated and lost all your benefits because you did not adhere to the COVID practices and had the shot, you lost all your benefits, and going forward from day one, all your benefits are going to be reinstated. What's wrong with that?
No, I think this is a wonderful act by President Trump on day one. To think that anyone, whether military or non-military, would be forced to take an unproven vaccine at the risk of losing your job was absolutely unfair. President Trump is absolutely right to reinstate these members with back pay.
Do you think there are going to be many challenges that it's going to rise in compensating these service members with their back pay?
Look, we have a national budget that is over $6 trillion each year. The few $1 billion that's required to ensure that these service members are not wrongfully harmed by the attempt to force this vaccine on them, we can afford that as the American people.
Do you think there will be any potential legal and logistical implications of deploying additional troops at the border?
There no doubt there will be some left-wing entities that will attempt to challenge this in court, but I believe the president has a very strong argument to be made that this is indeed a national emergency, and that as commander-in-chief, he absolutely has the power to employ the men and women of our military to protect our communities from this unlawful immigration.
Bruce Fein. Oh, no, on a different topic. No, I know you want to talk about it. No. We got it for you. So, Bruce Fein, John Brennan is angry. Obama's former CIA director. He's saying, which is not true, I'm going to say, that the president's language in revoking their access, he revoked their access, their intelligence access, because 50 of them signed on to a letter which they claimed that the Hunter Biden laptop, what was being put forth was propaganda and misinformation. And it has been later found that it was authentic, it was true from the start, and they used this to provide cover, so they compromised their security clearance. What's wrong with that action by the president of revoking all 50 of these persons, security guys, security clearance?
No, I think it's the right thing to do. You omitted that it was Tony Blinken who orchestrated this letter, who was then Biden's Secretary of State. And you're absolutely right. The laptop was admitted as reliable evidence in the prosecution of Hunter Biden. And you have constitutional right to a security clearance. I don't know what John Brennan brings to the nation by having a security clearance anyway. A good riddance to John Brennan. I don't think anybody should be having these security clearances after they leave office. It's like having a royalty that's really frowned on in the Constitution itself. It's too bad, John Brennan. Nobody else has security clearances either. I've never heard anything he said that was worth paying attention to anyway.
Our friend Steve Laffey is in Paris, France, enjoying time with his family. So I'm going to take the conversation overseas, but I'm not going to start with you, Steve. I'm going to stick with Bruce. What are the implications of us withdrawing from the Paris climate change accords?
To be candid, it's virtually zero. Number one, the Paris Accord, WHO, these are organizations, they're not treaties. Presidents can come and go. All of these years that have been devoted to making these targets, we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I believe last year was the highest year ever for greenhouse gas emissions. None of that is binding. It's all theatrics. And the fact is that no government is going to put its economy through wrenches that doesn't satisfy their own free market incentives that price and supply and demand produce. So I don't think it'll have any impact at all on climate change.
When I came into the studio today, I saw Juanita and I saw Aideen. You know what I said? Those are women. Those are females. I'm sitting here on the set. I look at Bruce. Okay, Joel, I see Steve, the director over here. I said, those are men. What is wrong with the President of the United States saying the federal definition of gender is male and female? What is wrong with that? Isn't that what it is? Are you not a man?
I'm a man, and I'm thankful for the women in my life, and I'm proud to be a man.
And they're women. What is wrong with the president making? I don't even know why he has to clarify that. It's just common sense, Bruce.
Well, I don't know why he's saying it. What constitutional authority is he speaking from? And so, if anyone has the authority to make it part of federal law, it'd be Congress. Again, this is
you already
the process.
said that Congress has abdicated itself to the executive branch of the government. This is what you said.
No, exactly, and that's why you have to force it back to Congress. And Mr. Trump should have said, Congress, you need to do X, Y, Z, instead of just asserting it as own. It's the only way you'll ever get Congress to do its homework. They want to dodge every issue under the sun so they can't get primaried. And you have to force them to take accountability, otherwise they'll do nothing. It's like birthright citizenship. It's arguable that Congress, which has primary authority under the 14th Amendment to pass enacting legislation, might say something about who's subject to birthright citizenship or not, but the president has none. Why didn't Trump say, Congress, you need to do something here? Process is everything in this country, and we're losing this. We're creating a king, whether it's Biden or Trump or Obama or Clinton or Bush.
Go ahead.
I think on the matter of how many genders there are and what defines a man and what defines a woman, in this instance, President Trump is simply stating reality. This is not changing reality. It's not changing the law. In fact, Congress or the president or a king does not have the power to redefine what a male or a female is. All the president is doing right now is expressing reality. It's a shame that we have to do that in the 21st century. But that's where we are.
But you're talking about something that's just common sense.
Yes.
That's all it is.
But I think, let me interject here. In the Supreme Court in the Bostock case made it clear it was a statutory issue that Congress has addressed. What constitutes sex discrimination? And is sexual orientation a special category protected or not? And that was an issue, you can agree or disagree, that was in Congress's ambit. It wasn't in the president's ambit, and that's what's being litigated right now in furtherance of Mr. Trump's change of policy of Mr. Biden.
Well, Bruce, I think you have the answer. You've said many times on this platform that Congress will not do its job.
Unless you force them to do it.
May I finish? And because the president has been in this place before, he understands he must do the job. And if he must lead, that's exactly what he's doing. And we finally need somebody to lead.
No, we cannot have a president say Congress won't do anything, I'll usurp their power. What's going to happen?
Congress can always take their power back, Bruce.
It will not.
Can.
That's not how it works here.
Then
Power
blame
is
Congress.
never surrendered
Blame
back.
Congress, don't blame Trump.
I blame everybody who's flouting the course of process. There's culpability on all sides. A president has the power to resist his power. He can go to Congress, says it's your job. If it's not your job, then it's not going to happen. I remember Obama went to Congress. He wanted immigration reform before he did DACA. He says, hey, it's your bailiwick. Then he said, okay, well, just do it on my own. That's how we ended at DACA.
In other words,
we tell that today.
In other words, by this conversation, we all know this. There's a new sheriff in town, and he's working. He is not delaying anything. He's letting the world know I'm here. And these are the changes you can look forward to. Promises made, promises kept. We'll be back. I thought I'd warm it up. Steve Laffey, who's in control of the CDC?
I don't know if I really know. Who is in control of the CDC?
Can anybody answer that?
Well, I think it's a unit of Health and Human Services, which would be ultimately the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I don't think we have a confirmed nominee yet.
How do you think Trump's nominees before the Senate. How do you think it's going? It's a show. All they care about is they need a casualty. They need to have a head to pin to say at least they got one. They tried with Pam Bondi. They tried with Hegseth. Now they have Robert Kennedy Jr. next week. We're going to talk about that later on the show. It's just theater. They don't care about whether these candidates are qualified or not, Joe.
Well, I think you're right that there is quite a bit of theater. But look, the Senate has a constitutional responsibility to advise the president on these nominations and to ultimately consent. And there are a number of senators that I do believe take this job very seriously. Senator Tom Cotton, of course, comes to mind, especially in relation to foreign policy. I think it speaks quite a bit to the president's selection for Secretary of State that Senator Rubio was approved 99-0. But it is very important that the Senate truly debate these nominees, that they truly look at the background, and that they only approve nominations if they believe that that person will be able to both abide by the Constitution and perform their duties responsibly. The Senate should not just be a rubber stamp on President Trump's nominations or any other presidential nominations.
You know, Steve, what about drill, baby, drill?
We love it. Drill, baby, drill is great. I don't know how much more we're going to get out of the ground, but we have become a net oil exporter. Our natural gas resources are now heading over to Europe to help them out. What's happening in Europe? Our cost should remain very low. And this is a vast difference than what Joe Biden wanted to do. And I'm just excited that if we can even add in nuclear power, if the president moves forward with talking about nuclear power so we can have steady and then making our grid even more hardened. These are the kind of things that will help America and will help investment in America, because let's face it, globalization's over. I think the president understands this. And so companies are coming here, and they got to come here because he's got to do a lot more with the Treasury, a lot more about the dollar, a lot more about the debt. But the things he's starting to do, if America is going to run a capitalist country, it runs off cheap energy, Armstrong. And we need cheap energy, and we can produce cheap energy. We've got to do away with a lot of the regulation, and we got to do something about California. There's a lot of things still to be done, but we're off to a good start. And we're going to see a lot more drilling in America, I think, and in North America, and including Mexico. So that's the key. If you want high costs of inputs of making products, go to Europe, go somewhere else. But America has cheap energy, and that's why America is remaining strong compared to Europe.
You know, Bruce, fine. I must admit, I want to come back to this first. I want to come back to the January 6th, and I also want to say that our very dear friend and colleague Ed Martin, who normally sits here on this set and go back and forth with us, was just named by President Donald Trump as the new U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia. So we congratulate our colleague Ed Martin on that position. And you know, Ed Martin, one of his favorite topics, Bruce, was the January 6th. You know, one thing, listen, President Trump giving a sweeping pardon to people who brutalized law enforcement officers, traumatized them, the kind of message it sends to law enforcement across the country is just unprecedented. But then you look at what Joe Biden did with the pardons, with his family members, and over 2,500 people. I mean, do we need to go back to the Constitution and sort of dilute the powers of the pardon for the presidents of the United States? Because in many ways, and I understand that we have everyday average working Americans who Donald Trump should have set free from January 6th, but there's some people that should not have gotten a sweeping pardon. What should we do about this issue of presidential pardoning going forward?
First, I'd like to have one footnote to your observation. Some of the ones who were violent against the police, they got commutations, not pardons, but the vast majority got pardons. But putting that aside, I think the pardon power is out of control. When the framers were discussing the pardon power, they anticipated that if a president used it to shelter his friends, his political friends, his family friends, they would be impeachment. Well, impeachment's a scarecrow. We're too polarized to ever think you're going to get 2/3 in the Senate to convict anyone who's impeached of the presidency. And we have not only Mr. Trump's pardons on January 6th, we have President Biden's unprecedented preemptive pardons. Well, you don't really haven't been convicted or done under investigation of any crime, but in anticipation, all my family is getting pardons, all the January 6th committee is getting pardons. Some of them turned it down. They said, wait a minute, that's an imputation of guilt. I didn't do anything wrong. And prior to that, he pardoned Hunter Biden, clearly a conflict of interest and outrage. He said Hunter Biden was unfairly treated, but it was his own administration, a preposterous defense. And this is something that the framers understood in terms of standing. You're not going to get this issue in a court of law. It's impeachment for the abuse of that power. It undermines the idea that we're all equal under law. And I believe you only can change this by an amendment, and it ought to be subject to
what about,
the Congress.
What were your thoughts quickly on Ross Ulbright, Silk Road?
I repeat your question.
Ross Ulbright, Silk Road, who was sentenced to almost 2 life sentences.
I think it's absolutely disappointing that this individual was pardoned. If you look at the crimes that he committed through Silk Road, which was a vehicle
Well, it was a narcotic for drugs and,
yes.
and taking people out, assassinating them. You could find an assassin on this road.
Yeah, and the drugs that were involved here, this wasn't just marijuana. These were drugs that were killing individuals. He was duly sentenced to, I believe, life in prison. He should not have been pardoned. I think to your point about the J6 rioters, though, Alexander Hamilton wrote about the power of pardon when it comes to sedition and treason in Federalist Paper number 47. And Hamilton made a compelling argument that there are instances in which the pardon power should be used to actually, for individuals that have engaged in seditious behavior in order to bring the country back together after such an event. It's worth a read.
Well, it is. Don't worry. I've read that. And he was anticipating, he says, this is how you could suppress a rebellion. You could pardon them in order to stop the insurrection from continuing, not after there'd been a trial and a conviction.
It's all the ones.
Read that one.
It's all the one's interpretation. Come on now. Oh yes, it is. Let me go to Bruce. You know, I was talking to my sister Mary, and she was talking about Trump and these electric vehicles and how much she appreciated his executive order on it. And her attitude is, why can't I just buy the car I want to buy? So you know, Steve Laffey, what about rescinding electric vehicle mandates on the auto industry in the U.S. energy policy?
Yeah, if that hasn't been done, I thought it was being done. I think it will be done, and I hope that it is, because that would help the middle class. In other words, many car companies, not Toyota and not Subaru, let's say, but American car companies have just gone off the deep end, lost billions and billions of dollars on electric cars, and had states start to force them to buy much more expensive cars, which now, by the way, are getting less expensive because they can't sell them and they're trying to get out of it. So yes, and one thing we do know is that the total pollution created, say, by a Toyota Corolla over its lifetime is far less than a Tesla. Far less. The initial production to make an electric car pollutes a lot more. So these liberals are off totally at the end of a plank and should just jump off. And so if we can just get back to producing cheaper cars, I would hope that Donald Trump would work with Congress. I think Bruce has hit on the real point. Donald Trump is heading down the wrong road with executive orders. He needs to lead for the long term by going to Congress and saying, here's a bill, introduce this, let's pass it today. And then let the Supreme Court hear about it, what birthright citizen is, and make a decision. Let's do it that way. And I also think he's making a big mistake by not going up the big issue, which is money. It's the debt, and he's not doing anything about it. So he only has 100 days. A lot of these executive orders, a lot about cars, are just not getting to the real problem in America to help the middle class.
Why is he not talking about debt?
Well, when we talk about debt, this is a politically problematic issue. Look, if you want to address the long-term debt problem in this country, you have to do more than just enact the the proposals that are being put forward by DOGE. You have to have real changes to our entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and those proposals, as well-intentioned, as necessary as they are, anytime a political leader makes that proposal, they're accused of wanting to reduce benefits for those who are already taking those benefits. And of course, that's an outright lie. You can make these changes to entitlements without cutting benefits dramatically for those already on these proposals. But that takes a lot of explanation on the part of the politician making that proposal. And I think that's why President Trump, during the campaign, said, oh, we're not going to touch Social Security. We're not going to touch entitlements. Unfortunately, if we want to really address the heart of the problem and the debt crisis, we have to address entitlement spending.
You know, I got to tell you, we're going to break here. You know, and correct me, I don't know any incoming president who's taken the reins of power, who's issued so many executive orders, who's done so much, has been so focused on governing. I mean, from the time he was at the CAP Center, he was signing the executive orders, went into later in the night on his inauguration night, he was late for his balls. You can tell he's thought about this a long time, and he's really thinking about his legacy, honoring his word. I mean, Bruce, is really unprecedented. I mean, to have this man working the way he's worked. You may not like the outcome and what he's pushing, but you've got a president back to work. And I think the American people are willing to give him a chance, because this is what they voted for. We're going to take a break. We're going to turn our attention to foreign policy and much more when we come back with Joel, Bruce, and Steve Laffey with that beautiful view of Paris, France. We'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, Joe, how has the president's economic policy evolved in his today compared to, let's say, in his previous administration? What are you seeing that's different?
Well, I see that round two with President Trump, he seems to be actually doubling down on some of these policies. Of course, on the one hand, we see the tax policy, which created so much economic growth, and we see the president encouraging Congress to extend and actually deepen those tax cuts. But what I'm actually quite troubled by is that you see the president trying to impose tariffs, not just on China, but you see President Trump proposing broad tariffs on all imports coming in from Canada, coming in from Mexico. And if that were to actually come to fruition, we're talking about the biggest peacetime tax hike since 1940. And that's just on the tariff component for Canada and Mexico. It would add nearly $1,000 per family per year in cost of living increases. And as we're coming out of this 4-year period of Bidenomics with family income stagnating and prices rising by more than 20%, imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico next month, which is the possibility, this would be an awful decision that would hurt both families and businesses.
You know, I want to come back to foreign policy. That's a hint. Let's talk about what do you see in Trump's foreign policy that gives you hope and also pause, Bruce?
Well, the hope is he says he wants to be a peacemaker.
Okay.
And that is, you know what, how you have peace? You have invincible self-defense. You don't go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. And he said in his first term, he wasn't elected president of the world. President of the United States is all he did. But he expanded NATO, brought in 2 new countries, Montenegro, North Macedonia. He didn't get out of any of the wars that he inherited. He didn't start any new ones, but he didn't retreat whatsoever. Now, it's a little bit troubling for him to raise the issue of manifest destiny. That was the banner we went into Mexico by fabricating an attack on U.S. soil. Even U.S. Grant, the general in the Civil War, president, said it was one of the worst wars that he ever saw. One country taking advantage of a weaker another country. He suggested he'd go into the Panama Canal and re-steal it after we stole it once in 1903, with manipulation and sending our armed forces there to have Panama secede from Colombia. Then he suggests he may be entering Greenland, which would trigger all of NATO countries attacking us. So I don't know whether he really believes any of this is serious, but you need to be serious in foreign affairs because your credibility is everything. If everybody's doubtful, does he really mean this? Does he not mean it? That's very, very bad. So he's given mixed signals. He said he wants to be known as a peacemaker, yet his language suggests, we're our imperialism on steroids.
I want to have this debate for a few minutes on climate change. I want to start with Steve Laffey. Oftentimes when we talk about climate change, you look at the wildfires in California that continues to rage. We don't often talk about the role that nature plays. You look at the volcanoes, all these things are not taken into consideration. How much do you really believe climate change is a real threat to the environment, Steve?
I don't think it's a threat at all. I don't believe in it. I'm just going to be very frank with everybody. I see no evidence at all. I don't know who does. I don't know why people take such small sample sizes. If the Earth has been warming for 20 years when it's roughly 8,000 years old, give me a break. Like people have to stop this. There are more trees in the world than ever. And by the way, if degrees would rise by 2 degrees worldwide, it might be very helpful to lots of people rather than detrimental. But getting back to this whole thing of what people say and then what they do, I live in a city of Fort Collins where they try to be net zero, which would have no effect on the world. Communist China continues to put up a new coal-fired plant every week. And we sit here talking about we're not going to heat up our houses. Is someone joking? Let China do something about it if they want to do something about it. Through our growth of natural gas, we've reduced CO2 emissions by 20%. Where's that in the newspaper? Where's the thank you from somebody else? And look what's happened over in Germany. These people have taken down their nuclear power plants to put up solar. It was reported in Europe today that they are using more solar than coal. For what reason? The cost of electricity, the cost of natural gas in Europe is 12 to 15 times what it is in Colorado. 12 to 15 times. You want to be rich or do you want to be poor? That's the question. And Europe seems to want to be poor.
Joe, let's talk about the lifting of the sanctions on the Israeli settlements and how it's going to affect Israel relations in the broader Middle East.
Yeah, I think this is very important. One of the best things that President has done in the first week is lifting the sanctions that were imposed on a number of so-called settlers in Israel. And that's a term I actually bristle at because if you've actually, and I know you have, Armstrong, traveled to Israel, you see that these settlements, they're actually neighborhoods. These are mostly suburban neighborhoods in Judea and Samaria, regions that Jewish people have lived in for thousands of years. This is the heartland of the homeland of the Jewish people. And to think that the prior administration or President Biden dared sanction and dared try to boycott Jews who are simply living in Judea and Samaria, their indigenous homeland, that was outrageous. And I think that President Trump should be commended for lifting these sanctions and embracing the fact that Jews are once again living in Judea and Samaria.
Oh, of course you're going to say something, Bruce, so go ahead.
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that. It is not at all clear that they may have been living in settlements, but whether it was on their sovereign territory or on disputed sovereign territory is surely unclear. The boundaries remain under international law disputed. I understand what the Israelis believe. It's not accepted worldwide at present. And it wasn't just we're imposing sanctions because you're living in the West Bank, because there was credible evidence that they engaged in attacks on Palestinians who are also living in the West Bank. And some of them do. I mean, it's not at all surprising because we know they're bad apples in any community. But I think that's a little bit simplistic, especially when you're ignoring, the other things that are also happening at the same time in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, which are frightening to anybody who cares about decency and innocent civilians.
How important is it that the president has declared terrorist groups and gangs? He's put them on these gangs and cartels. He's put them on the terrorist list. How important is that, Steve?
It's very important. We need to tell people in America, one, these are the terrorist groups. Two, these are the countries you shouldn't go to. By the way, they're saying you shouldn't go to China right now. Three, President Trump needs to have a consistent policy. What we're talking about here when it comes to foreign policy is President Trump's massive inconsistency. Are there going to be tariffs here? Will there be tariffs on Canada, which would be really stupid, as Joel has pointed out? We need to have free trade with our allies. We need to punish our enemies, China. He's gone from 60% tariffs to 10% tariffs, an extra 10% tariffs. Will Apple computer be accepted from this? He needs to have a foreign policy win, and he needs to bring his allies together with him. So we should have a free trade with the UK. We should be talking about China with a 60% tariff because we want everybody out of China. They're our enemy, right? So this inconsistent policy and foreign policy with Ukraine, he's going to end it in 24 hours. This is what hurts him. And because the ticking time bomb of debt is going to eat him up if he doesn't make significant changes that Joel alluded to, that can be made. And there's no president in my lifetime who's in a better position to do so because he can't run for re-election. And guess what? It's always the opposite. For Biden, he stuck around 2 years too long. If he left 2 years into his administration, he goes down in history as at least a mediocre president. He leaves as the worst of all time. For Trump, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. If he doesn't do something substantial, and the bond vigilantes, because rates are ticking higher, the debt's too big, and it keeps happening, and he ignores this giant problem that we all see, and does nothing about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, which he can, and he can bring it to Congress, and people don't have to get hurt. It's just going to cost a little more. If he doesn't do that, he leaves in disgrace also. That's the way it works. You take leadership in the first 100 days, and then you ease your way out, or you keep ignoring the giant problem in the room, and somebody plays musical chairs and gets caught without the chair. And that will be Trump within this presidency if he doesn't do something about the debt, which is directly related to consistent foreign policy.
Well, I think that the president is very aware that the next 4 years will determine his legacy. But boy, they're bashing Biden, man. I'm telling you, from across all the political spectrums, the media, it's just, man, Biden. It's just as sad as just they are blaming him for Trump. Is that what it is? That he should not have run again, and that he's the reason why they had such casualties in this last election?
I think you're right that Biden should have stepped aside and not run again. It would have been for the best for the country. I think it would have been far better for his own political party as well.
He's still saying he's the only one that could have beaten Trump. Is that his mind? It's
hard to prove the negative, though.
Oh no, it's not hard to prove that one. But Bruce, what about his legacy, man? I just found when Steve said that he could have been a mediocre president. I mean, come on. I mean, it's really bad for Biden.
It's very, very terrible. I think he'll be worse than even James Buchanan, who has notoriety of always fueling the Civil War. But I think that Biden will go down really as someone who was vacillating. He usurped power. He said one thing at one time and something else the next time. I believe even foreign policy showed that he was a puppet of Netanyahu, who would say something and then he would back down. And his policy in Ukraine, again, is very wavering. On the one hand, think of this contradiction. We say that we're fighting in Ukraine because we don't want to give Russia a veto over its entry into NATO. And then they applied for NATO, and we say, no, you can't have Ukraine into NATO. So there's no coherence in his policy. He ruled by executive order the same way other presidents have when they couldn't get anything through Congress. And in general, I thought he showed the last months, pardoning Hunter Biden, this was just a family affair with him. He had no higher concepts or good for the country.
Armstrong, I just heard our friend Bruce here say that throughout the last few years of the Biden administration, that Biden allowed himself to be basically bullied by Bibi Netanyahu and to back down. Let's get this right here. When Israel found itself up in an existential battle against Hamas, the prior administration continued to back down, not in defense of our ally, but they allowed the radical left-wing, pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah elements within the far left to affect their foreign policy. You saw a U.S. administration withhold weapons to our staunchest ally, Israel, when it was in a fight for its life. And I'll tell you what, I know that there are criticisms against President Trump on a variety of issues, but I am thankful that the best friend Israel has ever had in terms of a president is back in that White House, because the incoming this president, President Trump, has made it clear that he's going to stand by our ally. And look, and I think the best appointment so far that President Trump has made is Mike Huckabee from Bastard to Israel.
Let me just say, Biden, I'm going to keep you in my prayers. You know what's sad? When you die, they'll say nothing but good things about you. They'll resurrect you. They'll find all the good things. But as long as you live, this is what you got to live with. But you know what? I wish you the best. We'll keep you in our prayers, and you finally get the rest that you need. When we come back, we're going to talk a little about RFK and his policy. His confirmation hearings are coming up next week. Let me thank my guests, Bruce, Joel, and Steve Laffey in that beautiful background of Paris. I'm almost jealous because I need to get to Paris. I got something I need to do there. But look, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
I'm so pleased to have Dr. Eric Berg joining us. You know, the best-selling author, the largest health channel on YouTube with over 30 million subscribers. Dr. Berg, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
You know, Dr. Berg, you built a significant following by simplifying health and nutrition concepts for the everyday person. What inspired you to focus on not only this practical approach, but why is it that you believe, despite what other Nobel Peace Prize laureates are saying, that RFK Jr. is the best person at this time to be confirmed as our next Secretary of Health and Human Services?
We need someone who is a non-politician. We need someone that has experience breaking up the conflicts of interest, the corruption going on at the nth degree in these agencies. So he is the guy to do it because he knows this area. He's an attorney. He's been doing it for a long time. And we need to get rid of the corruption, and we need to see the transparency. And he is the guy.
Tell us what he has been doing so people can understand what it is RFK has been doing over the years.
Over the years, he has been fighting for children, toxicity in the environment, safety, especially for vaccines because of the amount of dangers. And then, of course, they attack them. But he's been doing some serious environmental work for years, defending the the people on the street. And he's won massive cases against drug companies. I mean, in the billions. So of course he's going to be attacked. But we need someone like that, in bringing America back healthy again. And as you know, when we say making America healthy again, it's going to be a massive reform. And we need to kind of go back to when we didn't have all this obesity, autism, allergies, chronic disease.
Dr. Burke, what is wrong with healthcare, and what would you like to see happen at the CDC and HHS moving forward?
Yeah, you kind of have like this interesting dynamic. You have all these agencies that are pretending to be agencies, but they're not really wearing their hat. They're working for corporations. There's a lot of corruption. There's revolving doors. And so you have this huge suppression going on with alternative health, with freedom of speech, freedom to do what you want with health. And unfortunately, even in the USDA guidelines, right, you have recommendations on the food pyramid. Do you realize they actually came out with a comment saying, well, there's not enough research yet to say that junk food is responsible for chronic disease? I mean, we got to use common sense, and this is ridiculous. I mean, this is they hire large PR firms, and they spin it all over the place. And unfortunately, you got this whole big food thing going on, right? And then over here you have big pharma. And I really think that most disease, chronic disease, comes from people eating too much ultra-processed food, calories, and then we're treating those symptoms with big pharma. And unfortunately, what's missing is this thing called real food. So by getting in real food, getting rid of the conflicts of interest, giving people a choice, and making these agencies wear their hats, it's gonna be huge for America. Right now, we spend $4.5 trillion on our healthcare. We have the worst healthcare in the world. So the product of our healthcare center is basically to make people healthy, but they're not producing the product. So RFK is going to go in there and clean things up and bring back health, not just for children, but for adults and everyone.
How about his stance on environmental health and vaccine policies aligned with the goals of a healthier America?
He's not an anti-vaxxer. He's for safety, right? For example, if you right now, unfortunately, big pharma is not liable if they get sued. You can't sue a drug company for vaccines. You have to go to a vaccine court. You don't even get a jury. In fact, even on YouTube, you can't even talk about any side effects from vaccines. So he's about safety. He's about doing the double-blinded placebo-controlled trials, which they're exempt from. So why would someone be against for doing safety studies on vaccines? He wants an individual to have freedom whether they want vaccines or don't want it. They shouldn't be forced on us.
So in a nutshell, what is all this pushback against RFK? Whose agenda are they pushing? And why they're so desperate to keep him from serving as the Secretary of HHS?
Think about what's at stake here. We have massive money involved in this, huge corporations, big food, big pharma, big chemical. And he's about to cut that umbilical cord, and he's about to reveal the corruption, and they're going to defend it. They have large PR companies. They're fighting it tooth and nail. They can buy lobbyists. They have buy scientists. So we want to control the narrative. We want to bring it back to the people, and a lot is at stake right here. And we need to get him in here, because if he's not in there, it's going to be, a lot more corruption as usual. And unfortunately, we are going to suffer the consequences.
So you really believe that RFK Jr. can play a pivotal role in restoring trust in public health institutions and policies?
He's going to clean it up so we could eventually get the trust back. There is no trust in these agencies right now. People don't trust them. The amount of corruption. What's interesting is like the taxpayers actually have to pay some of these big pharma drug companies to do their research, yet they get the profit. Where's our profit? If we're investing in their research through NIH, why do they get a special deal? Why do they get royalties and the public doesn't? Not only that, the public actually pays for subsidies for junk food materials. So we pay the junk food to actually, help them pay for the raw materials. So then they profit. We pay in the up front, then we pay for the junk food, and then we pay the doctor for insurance premiums a third time. So the consumers actually are paying for all this to their taxpayer dollars, yet they're not getting any benefits except, they get all the sickness, but they're not getting all the benefits, unfortunately.
I find it so fascinating when Donald Trump nominates someone as a potential cabinet secretary. All of a sudden, we love this phrase in the media, a controversial figure. What does that mean, controversial?
That is just it comes with the territory, because they're going to have to, they don't want him in, they're going to have to attack him, so they're going to label him as dangerous, extreme, an anti-vaxxer, he's going to take away your vaccine. They're going to spin this thing like you've never seen before, so because they do not want to let him in, because if he gets in, a lot of money is at stake.
What is at stake in America? I mean, we have these additives in food. We have young people getting cancer like never before. We have these toxins in our food. The FDA is compromised. They're in bed with big pharma and big corporations. Who's there to fight for the health of everyday Americans?
If you take a look at chronic disease, right, there's a big, huge section of that responsible for that, and that is called junk food, aka ultra-processed food, calories, which is a nice word of saying junk food. But these junk food manufacturing companies really are responsible for a big, huge section of our health. And unfortunately, there's other things too that we can't even talk about on this channel. We could probably talk about it maybe on X, but not this channel. But what's at stake here is that is the future of our children's health, the future of our health, because the amount of money that is involved in this, it's all going to be, going down the river, because it's like they do not want him in, and they're going to fight it tooth and nail.
How can Health and Human Services quickly balance innovation in healthcare with addressing long-standing issues like health equity and chronic diseases?
Well, that's what he's good at. He's like a professional person that stands up for everyone's rights. He's been fighting this cause for a very long time on a shoestring budget, and just from grassroots campaign, people that fund him, not by big pharma, unfortunately. So he's an honest person. He has integrity, and of course, they're going to do everything to taint that and twist it and alter who he really is. And but I think he has enough trust in the public, and also with the new administration to beat this thing. We just need to get everyone on board with this, because everyone wins except Big Pharma.
The good news is that the Republicans control the Senate and they control the vote. So that's the good thing. That's the beauty.
That is the good news. We have some advantages.
Let's not forget about that. Thank you, Dr. Berg, so much for joining us. I want to thank all our earlier guests for joining us for this edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. Good day, everyone. Root for your favorite football team. Championship weekend, baby. Go Commanders!